Welcome to week 3. Our focus this week is on the theory base for this class and for most of social work at the BSW level. You have 2 articles on the strengths perspective written by Dennis Saleeby. He's considered the father of the strengths perspective and was also one of my professors at the University of Kansas when I was getting my MSW there. When I joined the faculty, he became a colleague and was someone that I really respected. The other article is on the life course perspective. We'll start with the strengths perspective. Until the early 90s, when Saleeby and his wife, Ann Weick, also a professor and later the dean of the School of Social Work at the University of Kansas, brought the strengths perspective into the social work consciousness, social workers treated clients much like the medical profession did. That is, the social worker was the expert and the client was the patient who should simply accept the social worker's recommendations without giving the social worker input and without questioning them. However, Saleeby and others changed that when they began talking about client strengths. And this model, and it's a model that now permeates and influences much of what we do in social work, the client is considered the expert on their own experiences, and the social worker is there to help guide them, help identify and access resources, and empower them to achieve the goals that the client, not the social worker, has set. Social workers do this by helping clients identify the strengths and resources that they have. Table 1 on page 298 of the Cautions and Extensions article gives several examples of the differences in the strengths perspective versus the pathology perspective. Pay attention to these as you may be asked to give examples of them and/or identify them on the midterm. As you read the readings and do other work for this class and others, I want you to think about whether you see people from a strengths-based perspective or a deficit and pathology-based perspective. In looking at people through a strengths-based perspective, we don't deny that they have problems and challenges. Rather, we see problems and challenges in the context of the many strengths that they have. We see how strengths can be used to address the problems that they have, and the strengths-based session with James and that video is a great example of this. I encourage you to watch it more than once and get a feel for how the strengths perspective looks in practice. The application of the strengths perspective goes well beyond social work practice. When I meet with students who are struggling, I often inquire as to who their social support is. That is, who do they have in their lives that they can look to and ask for help when the going gets rough? Who can students turn to at 3 o'clock in the morning when they need something? Identifying people like this is crucial to helping others. Studies show that people with more social support are more likely to be successful in addressing their problems when they do arise. Shifting gears now, we'll talk a little bit about the life course perspective. This perspective, initially developed by gerontologists, but increasingly used by those in other fields, examines how our current place in life is shaped by prior events in our lives. The text, particularly the box on page 12, identifies different concepts we need to consider in looking at different age groups, including the cohort effect, transition, trajectory, life events, and turning points. In the pages that follow, the chapter gives a good description of each of these concepts, so make sure you're familiar with each of them, as they could be test questions, and equally, if not more importantly, they'll be helpful in your work with clients. As you read this chapter, I want you to consider what cohort you belong to. From 1930 to 1946, we had a cohort we defined as the greatest generation. From 1946 to 1964, we consider the cohort to be the baby boomers. From 1965 to 1984, which is my cohort, we call them the Generation Xers or Gen Xers. The mid-70s to the mid-2000s are considered the Generation Y cohort, and from about 1982 to 2012 are considered the Millennials. The terms and timeframes are not absolute and not universally agreed on, so don't freak out if you've seen other breakdowns of this. As the chapter notes, and as you should recall from your diversity class last semester, our experiences are also shaped by things we have no control over, such as the privilege and oppression that we experience. For example, a black female and a white male will have very different life experiences as a function of their differences.